Well, I think apologetics has changed. I think evangelism in the 21st century has spelled apologetics. I think we're in a culture right now of skepticism where people need answers, they need evidence, and so I think apologetics is really important these days, but we can't deliver it like we delivered it in the 1960s, which is when we basically lined up people against a wall and machine gunned them with a bunch of facts. I like to think of it in terms of relational apologetics or conversational apologetics. One of the reasons I think God has used my story to reach people with the gospel is it is a story. And, it's not just a bunch of facts, but it's a story about a human being who was a skeptic, who was a doubter, who was an atheist, who investigated the evidence and found it was true and whose life was changed. It's a testimony, basically. And so I think story is important. And I think in churches, testimonies are making a comeback. I remember when I was a teaching pastor at Saddleback Church with Rick Warren, we'd have people come up and they would literally read their testimony. And my first thought was, oh man, that's going to come off as lame. That's going to come off as stilted. That's going to come off as rehearsed. And yet, they were the most powerful moments of the services. When someone gets up and says, this is why I believe what I believe. This is how God has changed my life. So I think apologetics need to be melded into those kind of stories. When you look at some of the great apologists these days, like J. Warner Wallace, a former homicide detective who investigated the faith and became a Christian, that's a story that people can relate to if they're a skeptic or a Christian who's looking for stronger reasons to believe. So, I think that how we present apologetics these days is different than how it was in the past. I think it's important to validate the journeys of people who are not believers. I think to listen to them, to respect them, to do more listening than talking. And that's why these spiritual discovery groups are so important, because they create a safe place to have a conversation about spiritual matters, and everybody's opinion is brought to bear. It's not a lecture by a Christian, but it's a conversation. And especially Generation Z and millennials love to give their opinions. They love to talk about why they think what they think, and this gives them a forum to do that. And I think apologetics in that environment meets our culture in a more effective way than in